And the last time I was with you was in March of this year. And so my plan for tonight is to just spend about 15 minutes or so going through updates that feel relevant and context that feels relevant to provide for this conversation that basically gets us from March to today. So that's my topics that I tend to want to share about. So here are the three buckets. I'll provide some overall context for this conversation and the way we're seeing and thinking about the work. Talk about past and ongoing activities, again, starting in March. And then we'll talk about what's coming up for the program, at least until the next time I will be in front of you all. So in terms of overall context, globally, emissions have continued to climb, as you all are likely aware. Of course, we continue to experience the impacts of the climate crisis locally and presently. So as you all know, but maybe some of your YouTube viewers don't necessarily think about, this is not a future problem. This is a now problem. Although as we move into the future, those impacts will generally become worse and less predictable unless we can do all the things that we need to do, globally speaking. And although this is a global problem, I like to remind folks here that our global community is made up of a bunch of local communities like this one in many ways. And so for us to make headway globally requires us to make headway locally so that we can then share those lessons learned out with other communities in our area and beyond. The national context has shifted a bit since we last spoke. Of course, there has been regression on all things climate policy in a bunch of ways, and connected to a bunch of other issues beyond climate policy. Here, I think it's helpful to remind folks, at least my perspective, that the climate crisis is not the problem. It's a symptom of a set of problems that ultimately come back to how we treat each other and how we treat the planet that we live on. So if we can get at some of the root cause issues, we are more likely to be able to tackle the climate crisis itself. And this is a great opportunity. I was just listening to a podcast in the past couple of days talking about a few languages, one of which I think is Mandarin, one of which I think is Hebrew. And in these languages, challenge and opportunity have the same word or the same character. And so hopefully this is a moment where we can really double down on building community with each other and seize this opportunity to strengthen our local bonds and create the community that we want to be, including the way we want to show up in terms of emissions and climate adaptation. So as a reminder for folks who are new to the conversation, the Board of Supervisors for Albemarle County set some emission reduction targets back in 2019 that commit us to reducing our 2008 emissions by 45% by 2030, just 5 years from now. And although that was supposed to animate to 2050, which takes us to zero net emissions. Here are the latest inventory numbers. And so in our climate action plan, we are committed to doing a greenhouse gas emissions inventory every 2 years. However, since the climate program stood up, we have been committed to doing it every year. And we have already kicked off the work to do the 2023 inventory. As a reminder for folks who are new to this conversation, excuse me, the inventory tends to be about 2 years behind because federal sources that we require to complete our inventory often take that long for the federal agencies to publish, whether that's Department of Transportation or EPA or Energy or whoever it might be. And so you can see a general downward trend that is more or less in line with the blue line that takes us to our 2030 target. However, you'll also notice a couple of other things. One, the 2020 dip due to COVID when a lot of people were staying home And much of our emissions locally are from vehicular miles traveled. And so when lots of people are staying home, then you get quite a dip in where our emissions are coming from. Since we've bounced back from COVID, you'll see that at least as far as the data we have, we've been heading in kind of the wrong direction in terms of being able to meet our targets. And so we're looking seriously at this as a climate program and increasingly as a county government to understand what the big impact moves are. And I'll talk about some of these later in the presentation that'll get us back on track to meeting our goals, not only in 2030, but the more important goal of 2050. So some of the things that we've been up to since the last time we spoke are listed here. I'll highlight a couple of things for the group. I won't necessarily talk through everything. Some of these have been ongoing since before the last time we talked, and so they don't need much of an explanation. Folks, I'm sure, can go back and review previous videos where we've talked about some of these things. One thing that folks might be less aware of is really important and is relatively new is the Climate Action Leadership Team. And over the past several months, they have worked to provide feedback on and approve a number of projects that we're focused on for fiscal year 26, which takes us until the end of June of 2026. This Climate Action Leadership Team is made up of department leaders and folks in that general area of authority throughout the county government. And one of the important reasons for the formation of this team is to make sure that through action and through policy, climate action is a priority, not just for Jamie and his team, but for the entire organization at the staff level. So one of the things that these folks do is commit staff time of their departments to support different climate action projects. And I can talk about some of those as we go. One thing to highlight as the third bullet, the finalizing the community climate action grants. So we've had 2 years of the community climate action grant program, $100,000 program to award local nonprofits for doing some creative work in the climate space. And we're not going to be having that program available anymore. We're replacing that with a more targeted effort to prioritize a few types of initiatives and then just work directly instead of leaving it to chance who is going to apply for money and who's going to get some of the funding. Work directly with those folks to provide funding to pursue those goals. And I can talk more about that in our future work section of this. I always want to highlight the Energy Resource Hub, bullet 5, because although a lot of federal incentives have been going away and continue to go away, there are still some left, at least to the end of the calendar year, particularly solar on rooftop for the tax credit there. And these folks can help get you connected with the incentives that are available for anything energy related. So whether it's EV charger infrastructure, rooftop solar, weatherizing your home, attic insulation, changing out your heat pump, all those things have potential incentives available for you. So I really encourage you to get with energyresourcehub.org so you can connect with a real person who can walk you through and identify where those incentives might be. We passed, as a county, a solar ordinance in July, third bullet from the bottom. And this is one of the most progressive ordinances, if not the most progressive ordinances in the state. It's very supportive of solar generally as an industry. There was a lot of community engagement that went into developing this. And I know some of you were a part of that conversation, and you may have other thoughts you want to add to this conversation, but generally speaking, the climate program was really happy with passage of this ordinance. And I got to speak about this at the Virginia Energy Summit a few weeks back. So that was very exciting. I briefed the Board of Supervisors along with my supervisor, Greg Harper, in September 17th, I think was the date. So I encourage folks to check out the recording so you can see some of the things that we talked about with them and some of the feedback we got. Importantly, several of the supervisors talked about how it might be important for them to be as a body to be thinking about looking at things through the climate lens as they're making different decisions. And I couldn't have asked for a better reflection and outcome from that conversation than that sort of thinking that, we want all members of our organization, including our elected leaders, to be taking this lens on in all of our decision making. The last thing I'll highlight, we closed an advertisement for our second full-time climate position on the 10th of October. We're currently in the process of whittling down the 106 applicants for that opportunity, which was really exciting. Lots of highly qualified and really exciting candidates, in part, unfortunately, due to a lot of the layoffs and firings and forced retirements that have come at the federal level from different agencies. But it has opened up a lot of talent to communities like ours that are still moving forward aggressively in this work. So looking forward, providing this context just so folks have a sense, and I think this is as valuable for you all as it is for us, as we think about the types of solutions that we need to be focused on. This gives a sense of where our emissions are coming from. So you see almost half coming from the transportation sector, about a third from stationary energy, about a quarter from ag and landscape. One thing to note from ag and landscape, about 2/3 of that green area comes from the conversion of forest cover into something else. So that something else could be agricultural land, it could be housing development, commercial development, whatever it is. But we are still losing, on average, hundreds of acres every year of our forested land, and that's where that green space is coming from. I highlight waste as being only 2% of our emissions currently, but I will also, and I'll circle back on this briefly later, I'll highlight that waste tends to be a gateway topic for folks to get more involved in other environmental issues, including climate work. And so although it is a small piece of the pie in our territorial emissions, it's also a really important piece of work to engage folks, give them something they feel like they can wrap their hands around, and then as they get more engaged, bring them along for other conversations. So these are some of the focus areas that are ongoing right now and will be for at least the next several months. In 2 days, we have our first climate summit, and this is specifically for high schoolers at all of our high schools. So we have the advanced placement environmental science students from the various high schools and the environmental sort of like college track folks coming together in one space up at North Fork on Thursday for a 3-hour workshop where they're going to be brought through sort of a way of thinking about the climate crisis that provides a little more nuance, a little more of a deeper investigation. So as they walk away from the summit, as the future of tackling this problem, they can hopefully have a better way of approaching it. So we're not asking them to solve the problem, just asking them and presenting them ways where they can consider this problem differently and more deeply so they can come up with better solutions together moving forward. Super excited. This is our first one. We hope to have it every year. One of the projects that we're working on is a county code review. We are kicking this off with Chapter 18 to align with the zoning ordinance modernization process that our community development department is leading on. And this is essentially just saying, look, most of our county code, all these ordinances, et cetera, were written before the climate crisis was really at the front of people's minds. And therefore, there are a lot of perverse incentives and disincentives written into our code. So let's go reinvestigate these things, make some recommendations to how we might update the code to be in the context of the climate crisis. So that's some really exciting work. Along with that, this internal climate action support is where we're working with the same department, community development, for anybody that's going to go in and get a permit to renovate something, build something, develop some land, put solar on their roof, whatever it is. We want to update the content of the tool, the web tool they have to use to do that, so that it provides appropriate climate-related context and information. And we want to provide frontline staff in that department with different tools they can use, whether it's a brochure or something they can integrate into the conversation to highlight some thinking that the customer looking at them might do related to climate action and their project. So this is just the first of these departments and these customer-facing teams that we're kicking this off with, so that we can integrate climate action across all departments of the county. So that's super exciting. You might be familiar with these Soul Smart, Charging Smart certifications. Very briefly, it's just a way of bringing our policies, permitting processes, websites up to date and make it so that whether you want to do a solar project or put in EV charging as a local business or something like that, it can be really streamlined, really easy to do, so we can support the expansion of these industries in our community. I've said a lot about Resilient Together. What I'll just mention here is that we are in the process of actually writing our adaptation and resilience plan right now. It's going to be a several months long process to both write the plan as well as bring folks through in county leadership to the approval process. Ultimately, just like the climate action plan was appended to the comp plan last week, this plan will also be appended to the comp plan once it's approved, probably looking at next summer. Another project that we're going to be working on is working with the city and UVA to reimagine our organic waste stream. As I mentioned, waste is a small piece of the emissions pie, but it's a really important way for folks to get engaged in environmental work. And so this will allow us to think about creating a strategic plan, essentially, that we can activate and implement over the next several years to make it so that far less of our organic waste, whether you're talking about food waste, yard trimmings, things like that, actually goes to landfill. It goes to somewhere more beneficial. I've already talked about the Energy Resource Hub. Climate Action Collaboration Initiative. This is replacing the grants program. We have about $50,000, and we're going to be working on several projects that we've worked internally to kind of prioritize what those are going to be. The top four that we're working on are improving our canopy. So that is like getting more trees into the landscape. That's the top priority. And a second priority is electrification of equipment. That's likely to be working with our Parks and Rec department to take some equipment they're looking to purchase and helping them by adding some funds to their budget so they can get the electric version instead of the gas version. We're going to be looking at revegetating some of the low mow and no mow areas of our parks with native vegetation. And then the last one is working with community bikes, Charlottesville Community Bikes, to get them some funds in ways that are appropriate so that we can build out our cycling community in our area. We've got ongoing support to LEAP and AHIP, so I'll leave that alone just to say that, we're trying to do a lot of good work so that especially low-income homes can be fitted with appropriate weatherization, energy efficiency type of projects, so it helps them reduce their energy burden as well as conserve energy, which, given our current energy portfolio in the state, will also help us reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And finally, I already mentioned the territorial emissions inventory. That's the one we've been doing every year for the last several years. The new one we're going to be doing is the consumption-based inventory, also known as Scope 3 emissions, which takes into account all of the emissions that go into, mining, agriculture, original manufacture, distribution, shipping, all of that sort of stuff that goes into all the things that we buy, including services that we have in our community. So it's a much more appropriate look at our emissions and those emissions for which we are responsible. It'll just be alongside the territorial emissions. So I'm really excited to continue this work. We have an intern who's he's a graduate of UVA as of last year, and he's been working on the methodology that is the same methodology San Francisco uses. So we'll keep everybody in the loop. We hope to have both of those done by end of calendar year. I wanted to take just a couple minutes. I know I'm probably super long, sorry. Talk about the importance of the implementation of AC 44 and the implementation and adjustment of policy, generally speaking. So we did a lot of I think, good work to integrate climate action across all chapters of the comp plan, including some of the narrative work that's outside of the topic-specific chapters. Implementation of a plan like this is really important to reducing emissions over the long term. And similarly, adjusting the county code, which I spoke about a few minutes ago, is going to be important. And I'll demonstrate a couple of ways how this plays out. So one piece of impact, this is taken directly from the plan, Housing Objective 3. This is what it reads: increase long-term affordable and workforce housing options in Albemarle County through the development of new units and the preservation of existing units. So if, as a template goal, right, this second bullet is not in the plan, this is just something I'm providing as an example. So if we get to the point where the percentage of the workforce that lives in the development areas increases from the current 35% that live there to 70%, we could reduce our transportation emissions by that many tons per year, or 35% of our total transportation emissions. So just pursuing that one objective in the comp plan and successfully doing so could have a huge impact on our emissions. And it shows you at the bottom of the slide what the tons reduction per person in the county could be by successfully implementing something like that. Likewise, a second example, this is from the action level. The previous was the objective level. Transportation Action 3.6, through strategic investments in transit infrastructure, facilities, and services, increase the percentage of transit trips as a percentage of all trips in the rural and urban areas. That's from the plan. The second bullet is just an example, again, from me. If we were to say 70%, get 70% of development area residents so they could ride transit to work or school instead of taking their personally owned vehicle, and we could reduce our transportation emissions by this additional over 100,000 tons, or another 17.4%. You put just those two things together and you're halfway to the goal, right? So that's just trying to exemplify the importance of implementing some of the work that is in AC 44, and the importance of that policy document and policy, generally speaking. As a comparative point, so we funded the International Rescue Committee. They do amazing work. We funded a very specific project at their farm for $25,000 last year. And we calculated the likely emissions from that project annually to be around 40 tons per year. Compare that to this number, right? And the type of work that the climate program needs to be focused on is certainly making sure that our policies are aligned with climate action, with a zero net emissions future in 2050. So just want to provide some context about the importance of moving toward the implementation of AC 44 and other policy tools that we have in our toolbox. With that, I will stop sharing. I'm happy to go back to any slides you want to discuss, but I'll just lower this for now so that we can talk to each other.
Thanks a lot, Jamie. That was a great presentation. I really enjoyed the focus on the future activities, as well as the in-depth analysis of the inventories that have been done. I guess I have one question to start. And it's sort of a question / observation. I went to that county meeting where you spoke to the board, and you did a great job, but you encountered more flack than you portrayed in your description of the meeting. And I guess my question is, do you feel like you have the support of the board in your climate team's activities? Because the board, at least certain members of the board, seem to, first of all, sort of had a lot of sensitivity about about the public's perception of their climate action bona fides. But they also had, at least a couple of them had questions about the, I guess, the expense and the overall effectiveness of the actions that are contained within the climate action plan. So do you feel like you finally have enough support from the board?
So being mindful that we are recording this conversation, um, I'm gonna answer your question directly and honestly, but it's going to be a short answer. I don't want to go into too much detail here. What I will say is I feel like we've always had the support of the board. For me, that's never been a question. Um, I think there are other levels to the organization where that maybe always hasn't been the case. But as far as the board level, I think their commitment to climate action has been, from what I've seen, solid and strong. Then there are questions of like what that looks like and how that gets implemented. That's a different conversation.
Okay, thanks, Jamie.
Sure.
Bob, do you want to start off with other questions?
Well, I'll try to make them brief. You were saying that the federal information is 2 years behind in terms of doing the emissions inventory. Is that federal information under threat by actions of the current administration?
Yes, and there are other organizations, particularly in the nonprofit space, that have been working hard to bring down that data, archive that data so that it's available for folks like us as we need it. So I'm currently not too concerned about being able to access the data from the past, but it's a different question about data being generated in the present and the near future.
It's a different question, meaning that it might not be available.
At all.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Second question.
At the same time, sorry, just to add this one point, I'm not a fan of AI, but I will say that there are new tools coming online that I'm still investigating to understand the strength of their methodologies. However, they are claiming to be able to measure, interpret real-time, almost real-time emissions data down to the county level. And at least one of those tools that I have seen has up through calendar year 24 already calculated for Albemarle County. So it could be that some other tools come in to kind of maybe supplement, hopefully not replace, some of the government data that ends up lacking over the next several years.
I think the problem with AI would be to verify it. How much of it is imaginary and how much of it is real.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the ag and forest, particularly the loss of tree canopy, are there efforts to reforest areas, even small areas? When we had a presentation on mini forests.
Mm.
And what efforts are being made to get land that's not currently actively in ag, but is being protected from heavy taxes, and get that back into forest?
So I'm not aware of any current programs at the government or any real significant like nonprofit work to do reforesting. Obviously, a lot of these lands are privately owned. And so that's something we need to consider. It's also one of the reasons why we're trying to focus on engaging somebody like Relief to do work in the county. They mostly do work in the city. I think exclusively do work in the city. But if we can support them in broadening their horizons, maybe they can help, build out some of the work that happens in the county. I also know that there's an ongoing conversation about things like the conservation easement program and whether that could be a beneficial tool. And that's beyond me. I think that's a board level conversation right now. Others on this call might be closer to that conversation, but I think there are tools available to the county. I'm just not aware of any that are being actively used for reforestation or afforestation at this time.
If my memory serves me correctly, I think Christine Putnam gave a presentation about less is more a couple of years ago. I don't know where that's getting public support or whether that's simply private. Third, you were talking about percentage of the workforce using public transit, what workforce have you defined there?
So our economic development office publishes numbers on the percentage of the people who work in Albemarle County and where they live. And most folks live outside the county and they commute in to work here, right? So based on our economic development office numbers, the latest that I've seen are about 35% of the folks who work in the county actually live in the county. And so if we can increase that substantially through affordable housing efforts, through infrastructure, density, all that sort of stuff, then we can build out the number of workers in the county who actually live in the county. Does that answer your question at all?
Yeah, I didn't know whether you're saying the county's workforce.
Oh, no. I mean, everybody who works within the
Everyone
boundaries
who
of
is
the county.
employed
Yes.
in the county.
In the geographic county, not the county, the organization.
Right.
Yeah.
And I work with a bunch of therapists at Martha Jefferson Centera, and most of them live either west or east of Albemarle.
Right.
Bill?
I had a couple of comments and you talked about tree canopy, and I'm just going to say, at least from my side, something really important almost slipped through. On Thursday and Friday, the School of Architecture has a symposium on I think they call it urban forestry or forest urbanism. They have a lot of very strong people coming to that, and I think that anyone interested, and especially somebody from the county, needs to go to that. If you don't already have it scheduled, I put some information in the chat.
That's great. Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, the other thing is, this is just a brief aside, that we were 350 is planning to have a few scholarships and opportunity for high school students to go to a location where they can learn about permaculture and tree planting, and we'll have a small scholarship for college attached to it. And we are at some point going, in the next month or so, make that public and try to get people to join.
That's great. That's 350, you said?
But
350?
Yes, 350. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, if you don't mind sending that along, we'll make sure to follow up with all the students at the very least.
Yeah, let me try to get something to you before before your meeting Thursday. Let me try to do something tomorrow.
Great.
And I know that I had a brief conversation with Relief also in last spring when we were thinking about last summer, and I think that they're certainly a fertile source of potential activists,
so to speak.
so to
Love it.
speak.
Thanks, Bill.
So I see that Tom has his hand up. James, you had your hand up before. Do you still have a question?
Actually, I wanted to tip my hat to Bob McAdams. He asked my question. It was related to the data, right? So we have the inventory, and I heard Jamie make the comment earlier about how some of that was dependent on the federal government, and kudos to Bob for recognizing the same concern.
Just on a sort of an ancillary point that's sort of related, I saw that Climate Central has a new tool out that gives a very specific, like county level data for recent climate impacts.
Oh, wow.
Due to climate change. So I can
Climate
put
Central.
that in the on the agenda document as well after the meeting.
That's
Tom?
great. Thank you.
That's actually Ren.
Jamie, your comments about improving the public transportation are impressive. I wonder if the county has any concrete plans. I just will recount a story I heard our recently I volunteered at UVA Hospital and worked with some UVA students, and one of them was trying to take the bus to Barracks Road to shop. She lives in the dorm, and it took her an hour and 10 minutes by bus to get there. And consequently, she took an Uber back to her dorm. So, I mean, unless we can somehow make the system more efficient and work, and people can get places in a timely fashion, it's not going to be used. So, what plans does the county have to improve this or make it more rider friendly?
Yeah, that's a great question. Up until fairly recently, the county has been, I would say, a minor player, or at least not the principal player in public transportation. Obviously, the city with CAT and everything has been the lead actor. So some of this is going to be worked out through the still somewhat nascent Regional Transit Authority, the RTA, the CARTA that has just been set up. I think I don't have a ton of detail where they're at, but I think it's still so new and they're still developing their processes, their ways of working, and who's going to contribute what and work on what, that I don't think any concrete plans have arisen yet. I would encourage folks that are interested in that topic to follow closely the work of the CARTA as they figure that out. And then even maybe beyond that, that's a transit-focused entity. I would encourage folks to think about whether there might be a future in which the city and the county and maybe others work together for a transportation authority beyond transit, and just taking a comprehensive view of all modes of transportation and how they can all kind of work together, not only for, all the usual transportation things like traffic and air pollution, but for our climate goals.
Thank you.
Sure thing. Sorry, I don't have a more specific
I know
answer
it's
for you.
It's a big problem. It's one that'll take a lot of people to working together and time and whatever, and people changing their habits.
That's right.
I was struck in the slide you had on the inventory over the years that even though the transportation sector was, it's still the largest component, the land use and the building components are stubbornly high, and in fact, they seem to be increasing even more than the transportation.
Yeah, actually the building sector, and so we combine from our climate action plan. You remember there are two different chapters. One's renewable energy, one's buildings. We combine them into something we call stationary energy for the purpose of measurement. And stationary energy is really the only area of our inventory that has been consistently decreasing over time. And that's largely due to improvement in the grid, in the energy grid. That, of course, is only being measured up till 2022 so far. And so with everything that's happening now with data centers, et cetera, potential other facilities, gas plants, and other things coming online, that may not hold.
Yeah, that's a great point. Any other questions from the audience? Well, thank you. Thanks again, Jamie. That was a terrific presentation. Really, really good. And also, I really appreciate your answers to the very good questions people had.
You're all very kind and generous with your time. Thanks so much, and have a good evening.
Thanks, Jamie. Good luck.
Thank you.